A 3D printing company called JLC 3DP contacted me recently asking if I'd like to test their services. They offer a ton of different types of low-cost printing for prototyping and production. One thing that caught my eye is they offer metal printing. Being able to print metal miniatures would be a game changer in the miniature world, so let's get right to it. The first step was figuring out what miniature I wanted printed. In my mind, to get the best possible result, a supportless miniature would give me the best chance to get a nice print. This wasn't necessarily based on much other than thinking that metal supports would be difficult to get off, so I wanted to avoid anything too delicate. I drew this little guy in Photoshop and made sure everything in the drawing had no overhangs that had greater than 45-degree angles, to avoid having supports. I reached out to our good friend Printed Encounter with a design, and this is what he came up with. I'm tentatively calling these guys the Maru. Ooh. Let me know what you think. As always, a huge thank you to Printed Encounter for the sculpt. It turned out perfectly. He is a huge help to the channel and an incredible sculptor to boot. Check him out using the link below. Also, if you want to print this little guy, I've added him to my model and bits box for my Patreon supporters. I tested him out to make sure he was fully supportless, and he was. Perfect prints on both an FDM printer and resin. And stay tuned for how it works in metal. If enough of you want a line of Maru with different weapons and loadouts, let a brother know and we can try to get something done. I decided to add another model to the JLC 3DP order that definitely needed supports just to see how it would go. This is another Printed Encounter model that I thought 1 was cool, and 2 would be a little chunkier to give it the best shot at printing. I uploaded the models and selected SLM. SLM stands for Selective Laser Melting. They basically start with a pile of metal powder, in this case stainless steel, and then a high-powered laser beam melts the powder layer by layer until a model is made. Think of resin printing, except instead of a UV light, it's lasers. There's more that goes into it, but that's the main idea at least. I placed my order and then JLC 3DP reviewed the files to make sure there weren't too many glaring issues. They told me that some of the models had parts on them that were too thin and possibly could have some warping, cracking, and some other third thing. Their machine uses supports regardless of the mini, so there's that too. I thought it was worth the risk of failure leaving them as is, because that's probably the type of mini y'all would be wanting to get printed. I know that's what I wanted. It's hard to get a 28mm miniature thick enough. Either way, it would be really interesting to see whether it works. That's why we're experimenting. I think it would be a good test to see what's possible. So I approved going with the way they were sent without any changes, despite the warnings. If any of you are going to try this out, I suggest choosing a model that fits the old Hammer vibe. Big details, chunky, and not too fiddly. And even though they will still use supports for printing, supportless minis typically fit that description. I made sure to buy a few copies of each to also test consistency and get a larger sample size of print quality. It took 12 days to receive the prints from the day my order was submitted. Not too bad. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty nervous to open the box since we went with the whole "it's okay if there are print failures" experiment. But no need to be nervous, the prints were way better than I expected. The prints had various levels of success, so I was glad to order some extras of each. Only 4 of the 15 prints had imperfections that I imagine people might complain about, like a bent tip or supports that weren't fully removed. Another thing worth noting is the little toady bumps on the little toady rumps varied from being there to shaved down and virtually non-existent, likely due to how they have to remove supports, which I can't imagine is easy with metal. Speaking of supports, there were a few supports remaining on some of the models, which I couldn't cut off with a hobby knife, and you could see some layer lines on big flat areas like the backpack, which I also didn't try to get rid of. You could probably get rid of these issues with enough effort and files though. I reached out to them and they said that these issues came from the post-processing process and that when placing an order, we can note areas we'd ideally like to conserve the detail to alert post-processors to not sand away wanted details, like the toady bumps on the toady rumps. And they'll pay extra attention to them. Although they cannot avoid altering things 100%, they'll do their best to limit them. If there are any model makers who want to use this metal printing service from JLC 3DP, I recommend making all the details more exaggerated. For example, the original sculpt on the Maro's lenses have a little rim around them, and the mask has small line details. While the details are fine for resin, they'd need to be a little thicker or more recessed when metal printing was the end goal. We didn't know how the details would show up this time around, but now we know, which is what makes this test so cool. As far as a first test of metal miniature 3D printing, I would say that this is a huge success. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you try it out, I'd love to hear how it went. I was dreadfully curious about how the metal minis stood up to the others. Here's a comparison between FDM, metal, and resin. The FDM one is printed at 150% scale, and the resin one is 5% smaller than the metal one. I'm not sure how much more detailed you could get as of right now, but I could see a metal printer in 5 years specifically designed for miniatures being comparable to the resin ones we have now. I could definitely see myself getting a retro Stargrave crew printed in metal with this amount of detail right now though. The weight of the metal minis is satisfying and gives a nice tactile feeling when moving the mini around. I wasn't planning a drop test, but I accidentally knocked one of these guys off my desk onto a brick floor, and it survived like a champ. It didn't get damaged at all. Painting the metal minis felt pretty normal compared to other miniature materials. The main difference is there's a lot of micro texture on the surface of the metal. You may need to thin your paints more than normal to fill all the little recesses. You may get a few white dots around the mini where the paint didn't fill into all the texture. Some of the areas with the most noticeable layer lines, like the top of this hood, sort of felt like a cross between resin and FDM painting. You can still absolutely get fine detail with these. For example, I was able to get some really nice small dots for highlights in the eyes. I was able to glaze, blend, and whatever else I needed to do. My normal hobby paints also seem to adhere very well. How do you think I did painting these? Do they seem the same quality as my other minis? I couldn't be happier with the results. For a first go, this is super cool. It's ready now for minis if you want a unique, solid look and feel that is different than resin and FDM. I like it. Huge thanks to JLC 3DP for reaching out for this collaboration. If anyone uses their services, please let me know and send me pictures via iPaintSmallThings on Instagram. I'd love to see how it goes. Also, check out Printed Encounter. He made all the models used in the video. And if you want the little hooded guy, I've added it to my model and bits box for my patrons. Speaking of which, thank you to my Patreon supporters. And if you aren't already and like these videos, your support would mean a lot. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe. Share the video with your friends to show them some cool new metal mini printing. Alright, bye-bye.